Right, here we go. And again, we've been told we've got to keep to the 2 minutes. I know David Pike's particularly looking forward to speaking on the first subject, which is the Asian Racing Conference, which took place in Melbourne this week. However, Neil Channing, it threw up some very interesting addresses, not least from the chairman of the International Federation of Horse Racing Authorities and the boss of Hong Kong Racing, all-powerful financially across the globe, Winfried Engelbrecht Breskes.
Yeah, he had a few things to say. He made a couple of comments about some stats. He said that 55% of the money, I think I'm going to get it right, 55% of the money bet in racing is bet by people over the age of 60, I think it was.
Really?
Did I get that quite
as
right?
Much as that?
And only 1% was bet by people under the age of 25, which he, rightly, I guess, perceived to be a massive problem for the future of the sport worldwide. If you can't get the young people to engage, who the hell's going to be watching racing in 20 years' time when the over 65s are doing less betting? So that was kind of worrying, and he led that on to talk about the whip, which obviously everyone likes to talk about at all times.
Particularly Tom Scudamore.
But he's been to a few meetings. But he was basically saying, well, you know, this is partly why in the UK the BHA are thinking the way they're thinking about the whip, because, you know, we've always got to be considering the future generation. And I've noticed on my social media this week, I'm kind of slightly going off of the Asian Racing Conference onto the whip, but a lot of people seem to be sort of saying, oh, we can't win over the antis, these people are not win-overable, if that's a word. But that's not really the point, is it? The point is about the people who are currently, you know, 14, 15, 16, 17.
To convince the indifferent, you mean?
Well, not just that, but to convince the people who are not even old enough to have a bet yet or be that interested in racing, who are going to become, you know, the potential target audience in 5, 6, 7, 8 years' time, that this is not a cruel sport.
That said, and we'll just roll this on to the next topic, which is the Chief Executive of the British Horse Racing Authority, Julie Harrington, because in her speech at the Asian Racing Conference, Tom, she again majored on the whip and perception issues. And I thought it was clearly it's of the moment, but I thought to go all the way to Melbourne and to major on that was interesting, shall we say?
Yeah, I think it was, well, probably slightly unfortunate. I'm not sure it was perhaps the correct thing to do, but look, at the moment there's a lot of debate, especially going on around here, and I think, you know, Neil's touched on it going forward. You know, the problems we have within racing and whatever is what we're doing to go forward. So much has changed in the last 20 years that we've basically sleepwalked around. You know, whether different people's betting habits, you know, the way animals are perceived and treated in everyday life. You know, 30, 40 years ago, ponies, horses were part of, you know, the rural life. The rural life over this country is eradicating very, very quickly. You know, the pony clubs that I grew up in were 300 strong. Now they're 40, 50. That is frightening. The pony clubs, the local shows, even in the last 5, 6 years, that's all changed. So people's understanding of it is lessening, and we haven't done enough about it, I don't think.
But you and I were both on the whip steering group, as we're reminded of on a daily basis. I came out of that thinking that the BHA was more confident in the whip as a tool of encouragement than it had been going into it. Yet now the Chief Executive of the BHA goes to Melbourne and gives a speech which is all based on fear and perception. And fear of what people think of the sport, or not embracing confidence in the sport, which I find slightly confusing.
I'd agree. We were there for it all and going through it all, and the arguments that was made for its place in the sport as encouragement, as safety. And, you know, it wasn't an argument to win or anything like that, but we made the case for the moral status of why it should remain for encouragement. And I thought, well, as it turned out, we did. We made a particularly pertinent thing, and they, I believe, came along with us. So it is sometimes frustrating to see mixed messages.
And the mixed messages to the point, David, where on the Jockey Club poster for Cheltenham, Rachel Blackmore's victory on Aplutar, the whip that she was holding in her right hand has been airbrushed out of the poster that's appearing all across the London Underground. How does that make you feel?
It's wrong, isn't it? I mean, I'm not sure it's the best poster, or they could have got a better poster than that, couldn't they? So, I mean, look, it's always, these rules always need to be tweaked and looked at, but in general, I think we do a very good job.
But what about the presentation of the image of the sport, Neil? I mean, can you understand why the Jockey Club, a big wide campaign, would airbrush a whip out of a picture?
I mean, we don't really know how that came about, whether there's
precedent for it. It happened in America about 5 years ago.
I mean, and the posters have been up since December, and people have only seemingly noticed it in the last few days, and it's become a big talking point. I wondered a bit more about, you often hear people say, what racing needs is one supremo to take over the whole sport, a Barry Hearn figure to just say, right, this is what we're going to do, and nobody can argue about it. Well, I think in this instance of the whole whip thing, you and Tom will know, because I don't know how many meetings you had to go to, but I'd imagine quite a few. And the process started, 20 months ago or something like that? I mean, it's dragged on quite a long time, and certainly all stakeholders got to sort of have an opinion, and there was a proper breadth of opinion. It kind of annoys me a bit to feel like some people, it looks like they just picked up the Racing Post last week and found out this was happening and got upset about it. When it was all announced, was it July or something like that? At the time, I remember it being barely a story on Sunday, that it got announced and everyone was like, yeah, that seems fine, whatever.
We were on our summer holidays at the time, Neil.
But I mean, it was,
that's why it wasn't a story on here.
In the media, it was no big deal, wasn't it? I just wondered, I was going to ask Tom a quick question. I know we're running at 6 seconds, but...
we've got a strict producer this week.
How much of a mandate did you have from the PJA? Because obviously there are many, many jockeys, some flat, some jump, some young, some old. They all had presumably different views. How much were you going into that meeting feeling like, how the hell do I represent all of these people when they all feel so strongly and differently about it?
So, contrary to what some of the things have been reported, there were groups set up among the PGA. There were constant emails sent out during the process. Obviously, it was difficult because on one side you're having you're on the group, and there are things that you're talking about that needed to remain within that group because nothing had been finalised. Sure. Or when we were talking about how we were going to go forward, and some things, I say, were to remain within that group. But as much as myself and PJ MacDonald, who's the flat representative, were going back to the PGA, who are then filtering it through messages and through emails. Now, whether things have been lost in translation on the way, a jockey's life is very busy, whether they haven't checked some emails, etc., etc., etc. But there are some cases where they were given information and they frankly haven't read it. And in some cases, I'm afraid that's their own fault. And I think a lot of it as well, it's all very well, things look fantastic on paper when you hear about it, but when you start to feel that your profession is at risk, and the fact that it seems like a great idea, you're suddenly getting a tap on the shoulder for that particular ride in 4 weeks' time, you're not going to be earning a living for 5 days. That gives you a kick up the backside, and suddenly, it does affect me. Before, you're looking at it thinking, yeah, that makes perfect sense, I can cope with that. Sometimes people not only don't like change, perhaps can't accept change and don't feel they have to change, but I'm afraid every single walk of life you have to do that. And perception, however much we talk about, is irrelevant. It's not. We do have a license. We do have to show how we're improving, how we're going forward, and at the end of the day, it's what's best for the sport.
But you can do that with openness,
absolutely,
transparency, and you can do it with confidence as well.
Yeah,
and I think quite a lot what we were talking about betrays a somewhat lack of confidence.
Absolutely. You spoke about the other day, the 5 main points, or the 20 recommendations that we went through with the BHA. 19 of them were put through. 18 of them are completely common sense. There have been 1 or 2 little things that have been perhaps lost along the way and have caused great uproar and great noise. But actually, I think the majority of what work the steering group did was correct, and it was brought upon us. There were reasons why we had to have the steering group. It wasn't a case that the BHA came to us. Government had gone to the BHA and said, you're going to have to improve certain aspects of your own sport. They've done that. They're making an effort. And as I say, I came away from it feeling comfortable in some things, but then you see what's happened over the weekend, during the week over in Asia, and it does just make you question some things sometimes, how we deal with some of the processes.
Oisin Murphy came back this week, and he came back with a winner. He went to Chelmsford, and he got a pretty daring run up the inside, and rode a winner on his first ride back for the Horse Watchers and Mick Appleby on Jupiter Express. And it seems from the mood at Chelmsford that the punters certainly, Neil, were happy to have Oisin
Well, it's quite
Murphy
well
back.
backed in the day, wasn't it? I mean, I wish Tom had told us in advance, because when people retire, when people come back and stuff, when there's a story like that, they always seem to win, don't they?
Well, it's a good job he didn't announce
No,
it
but
after a taxi.
there should have been a big plot, shouldn't there? Normally there's a big plot. The other jockeys know it's his last ride. Everybody piles
Like Dickie
on.
Johnson, you were supposed to lose the Dickie Johnson.
All that kind of thing, But no, it was good. I sort of slightly missed it. Did he say? Am I imagining that? Did I dream it? Did he say he's going to take out a jumps license?
He's taken out a jumps license to
What
ride
the hell's
bumper.
that all about?
To ride in the Cheltenham bumper, I presume.
Oh,
Bumper,
okay.
yeah.
Oh, that's fair enough, I suppose.
Would you now, if you had you haven't got a runner in the Cheltenham bumper this year, have you? Or have you?
No, if I did, I could have put him up now.
Yeah, would you? Would you have put him up?
Yes. Oisin's a top man.
Is he a jockey that you impartially admire for his skills in the saddle?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, he's a very good jockey. And obviously he's had his issues, and hopefully he's sorted them out, and he would probably come back even stronger.
If he does get riding the champion bumper, I hope he turns up before the race a little bit sooner than Kieran Fallon did. Just wandered in 20 minutes before riding refinement. Cool as you like.
And
he wasn't phased.
And it was a real thing then as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Spencer, Fallon.
I think in that particular one, those jockeys you mentioned rode in it. I think the late great Pat Smullen had a few rides in it. I remember Michael Hills riding in it as well. Richard Hughes rode Sergeant Reckless.
I remember that.
So, other than Jamie Spencer, they've all got a terrible record.
Did you win that one?
The bumper?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. What
Was it Lieberman?
Oh, yeah.
Lieberman? Did he win
Moon
the
Racer beat Pat Smullen.
But Lieberman won the bumper,
won,
didn't
Yeah, he won the bumper,
Yeah.
Never won another race afterwards, I don't think. Couldn't jump.
All right, well, Oisin Murphy is back this week, and he seems intent on only really talking after the Dubai World Cup. Wants to let his riding do the talking until then, and that's I think probably pretty sensible for the time being. Ronan McNally has been doing plenty of talking. The man who was given a 12-year disqualification from the sport by the IHRB has announced his intention to appeal, and this is what he said to Johnny Ward on Racing TV earlier this week.
The ban's been appealed. I'm abandoning the outcome of the charges. I'm appealing the actual ban. It's totally unheard of to get warned off for 12 years, the worst penalty in Irish racing. So I can't see how I'm the worst person that's ever come into Irish racing. There's a lot.
That's within your career as well.
Well, it's a lifetime ban. I have to come back after 12 years. I have to apply for a licence, which I probably would get rejected for. Tubbs will probably have his licence in 4 years to go riding. He's a very, very talented rider. Look, I've nurtured him up from he's 1-2 years of age. We'll go everywhere together. We do everything together. The thought of not being able to go onto the race course to saddle up his first horse or to be there to watch him coming in, it's not ending a career. It's ending a life for me. You know what I mean? And I can't imagine he'll even want to go racing probably without me, because just we're like two peas in a pod. We're like best friends. We're not even like father and son. Wherever I go, he goes, and it's sad to think that might be terminated there. I think it's very unfairly.
That's I guess the hardest part. You can't go racing.
Like, losing your licence is one thing, Johnny. That's right. You say, right, maybe you've done this, you've done that, you haven't done that. That's irrelevant. I said to the thank you. I said to the committee, one thing's taking my licence, I think, but the other thing's banning me from going racing. I said, me and Tubbs and my son, that's our life. We'll go racing regular. To think I couldn't go to Down Royal to watch the big November meeting, or couldn't go to take Tubbs. He's looking to go to Cheltenham this year. Well, in England they've already been banned, even though the appeal's pending, and I'm not even banned in Ireland. So at the moment, as it stands, I can't even go to Cheltenham to watch Cheltenham this year. Like I just cannot understand it, to be honest. It seems horrific. Most people in Ireland can't understand it. I seem to have the whole country supporting us there. That
I was going to ask you, what has been the reaction among trainers and horsemen and women, I suppose?
It's been funny there. Probably not many trainers want to really get too involved because everyone's a wee bit worried about their own position, you know. So I have had trainers, probably not that many to be honest, but I have had trainers ringing me to give me a bit of support. A lot have maybe stood back because they're maybe fearful of getting too involved and drawing the attention towards themselves. So the general public's been amazing. Like, I've thousands of messages anywhere we go. We get a good reception there. People are saying they can't believe of the severity of the ban. Ruby Walsh spoke brilliantly. Like, Ruby Walsh is no mug. Like, Ruby Walsh said he has read through these charges over and over and over, and the ban doesn't fit the crime. Kevin Blake said the same. You know, people that know just can't really get their head around the severity of the warning off and things like that. And look, on appeal, I'm very confident this will be turned around because I can't see how it can be upheld, you know, and I just pray that common sense maybe prevails and maybe we get a bit of justice.
Yeah, without getting into it, I suppose, if the IHRB were to maybe punish others like they have here and look into retrospective form and all that, there'd be a lot of people in trouble, I think. Well,
I'd say there's a lot of trainers maybe don't want to reach out to me because they're worried for themselves. If we start looking back at races 2-3 years ago and horses coming up through the handicap system and horses going off with big gambles, I said there's a lot of people in Ireland in trouble. So hopefully, look, at that'll all be turned around and that's not the avenue we're going to go down, because I think Irish racing's in big trouble if that's a precedent that's going to be set going forward, you know.
Ronan McNally speaking about his 12-year disqualification and the impact it will have on him and his family, in announcing his intention to appeal. And the question here, Tom, is about proportionality. The charges are the charges, and the reasons set out are the reasons set out. But it's whether the 12-year ban is proportional to the offences with which he's been charged.
Okay, everyone has the right to appeal, obviously. And if you're found guilty, you're going to get charged, and you have to accept that. But I agree there has to be common sense involved. 12 years does seem extremely harsh, but look, there are far cleverer minds than I probably sat on that board going through it, and there's going to be far cleverer minds than I arguing on Ronan's behalf to go through the appeal. So, say 12 years does seem very harsh, but as I say, you know, it's not something that would be taken very lightly, and you know, it does send a very stark warning to those involved in the sport that if you're going to go down certain paths, then you're going to be treated accordingly.
What I hadn't realised, Neil, is that his ban is already effective in Britain, even though it's still pending appeal in Ireland, which seems slightly strange. I'm all for reciprocity, but should it not be exact reciprocity either?
Yeah, I didn't know that, and I know the BHA betting intelligence people. They do the work for the IHRB, don't they?
Right,
I think, and so they're working very closely together. So they'll have obviously seen all the betting accounts and whatever. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, Irish racing has government subsidy. It's an industry as well as a sport, as it is in the UK. And people need to have confidence in the product and confidence if they're betting. And I feel like the thing with, you know, as a punter, lots of people think, oh, you know, the gambling, the kind of roguey element of the gambling is part of the Damon Runyon-esque thing, is part of the appeal of racing. But for me, if I see a horse that's had, you know, 6 duck eggs where it was tailed off every time, and then the next time it's 4 to 5 favourite in a 20-runner race, this turns people off the sport, doesn't it? But you're right, the proportionality, we're going to talk about Homer Scott in a minute, and you sort of say, well, hang on a minute, he just quietly handed in his licence while this man's getting banned for 12 years. That doesn't quite add up either. So it's a tricky one. I don't know. I mean, I feel like with Ronan McNally, he's kind of slightly rubbed the authorities' nose in it by... He hasn't just quietly run a couple over the wrong distance and given them a bit of an easy, has he? He's really taken the mick.
What do you think, David?
Yeah, you might be right with that. I mean, it does seem a very harsh ban, and obviously he's got to appeal. Perhaps they're making an example of him.
Well, I was going to ask you, as you know, a shrewd trainer, someone who needs to get horses categorised to get them all to win, would it make you think twice about the way you campaign horses? The fact that the authorities are clamping down on someone who's run horses several times in maiden hurdles to no effect, and then they go and win handicaps.
Everything's done within the rules.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, isn't it? So, what do you think, David? Do you think is it just part of the game? Like, obviously, you can have a horse that's bred to stay, and you try it over a short trip to give it a bit of a warm-up run, and maybe it drops down the weights a little bit.
Yeah, well, perhaps the race planning, the planning of the races needs to be different, or something like that. I mean, it's difficult when you're a smaller trainer and you're buying a horse for 5,000, and you're taking on in a maiden hurdle. You're taking on. In this country, Paul Nicholls, Nicky Henderson, or something in Ireland, Willie Mullins, Gordon Elliott. So you have to get the best out of your horse, whatever way that is within the rules, to get it to win for your owner.
And it's as simple as that. And that you feel that can be undertaken within the rules.
Everything we do is within the rules.
Yeah, no, I mean just generally, you feel that the framework of the sport is robust enough that you're able to get a horse in the right category, running against the right type of horses in its grade, without having to stash £20 up your sleeve from the handicap.
Well, no, exactly. I think you can do it. Of course, you do it within the rules, and some horses are going to improve. Some horses. Slow learners. Some, like you say, just want further in trip or stepping up in trip. You don't want to play all your cards straight away.
And your point, Neil, was...
Well, it's just a grey area between bring it on to
I was going to say your point, relativising this case, and a 12-year disqualification, not just a suspension, disqualification for Ronan McNally, versus the story we read about in the Irish Independent last week. It was another piece by the investigative journalist Paul Kimmage. This time it centred around the trainer Homer Scott, who won 2 Cheltenham Festival races back in the day, and allegations from a former member of his staff who had taken video evidence that she'd passed on to the Department for Food, Agriculture and the Marine, and also to the IHRB, of the alleged mistreatment of horses in Homer Scott's care. A particular example, a pretty harrowing example, she alleged of a mare that was covered too quickly after losing a foal when foaling in the field, and the mare collapsed and was then allegedly hung by a sling from the top of a barn. That was one of a number of pretty shocking stories.
It was absolutely
dead horses,
horrific.
Buried horses, horses being allegedly chewed by dogs and so forth. It was truly, truly shocking. Now, the nub of this story is that the IHRB have allowed Homer Scott to hand in his licence without any further censure
still has 50 horses that he's looking
after.
He's not licensed, but he's got 50 horses at home now, I read.
So the key question is, should there have been a formal and public inquiry, rather than just an allowing of...
Yeah, it's hard to... I mean, they've refused to comment on why he was allowed to just quietly hand in his licence. I mean, that's just the obvious question, isn't it? Why? What the hell's going on?
I mean, David, you're someone who looks after horses. I mean, this is the very essence of the game, isn't it? The way we must be expected to look after horses properly, and for the authorities to police that effectively.
Yes, it's got to be policed correctly. Yes, and you go into 99% of the yards, and they are loved for their care. They're in 5-star hotels. They're loved by the girls that look after them. But there's always going to be the odd one, isn't there? Unfortunately, in any walk of life, and. I'm only hearing what you've said on this show now. I didn't really read the article about it, but it sounds that it needs to be investigated, even if he has.
We had that number this week. 45% of under 25s won't engage in racing because they consider it to be a cruel sport. And of course, the huge defence that we all would come out with is to say that the horses are treated, like royalty. They have a brilliant home, and of course, 99.9% of the time, we all definitely know and believe that to be true. But of course, if cases like this are left unpunished or seemingly unpunished, if everything's true that's been said in this case, this just totally undermines all of that.
It's pretty horrifying, Tom, isn't it? Yeah. If all those allegations have any...
It shines a particularly bad light on a very bad egg.
and succinctly put. Talk about the changes to the European pattern, particularly in Britain. Neil, this piqued your interest. Why?
Well, I just thought it was interesting that it wasn't a huge number of races. I think there were a bunch of listed races. It might have been 4, it might have been 6. A couple at Salisbury. I think one's moved from Newbury to Goodwood. A couple at Salisbury have moved to a different part of the calendar. They've been brought forward a month. And it's basically the pattern committee just looking at these races and saying that, well, they will feel a bit better if we juggle them around a little bit. But I thought it was indicative, the governance system of racing and the way it's controlled has changed recently, as we all know. And in past years, we've always had the problem that the racecourses have a veto and they can block any changes that the BHA want to make. And partly that's why the BHA have had their hands tied over the years in terms of making changes for the better for the sport, because a lot of interest holders in the sport are in favour of things changing as long as it doesn't affect the thing that they're in charge of. And the racecourses, most people would say, I think, have got too much power and have blocked changes because it affects their business. I thought it felt quite good that courses were prepared to say,
be cooperative.
We don't mind losing a listed race to another course, a competitor, ultimately, because it's for the whole good of racing. I thought that was quite good.
Listed races are probably quite expensive for racecourses. They probably don't mind
maybe they were glad to get shot of it. I don't know, but I thought, well, look, if they can all work together, wouldn't
small
the world
field,
be
big executive contribution, not guaranteed.
Yeah. You're more cynical than me, probably, but yeah, I just thought, look, if that could carry on happening, a spirit of cooperation between racecourses and racing generally, that would be a good thing.
If everybody got on as well as Tom Scudamore and David Pike,
the world would be a better place.
Exactly.
The world would be a better place if everyone was less cynical than you as well.
Yeah. Well, that's it for this week's Talking Points.
Subscribe to Racing TV's YouTube channel now to watch more great races like this.